So from saying we've lost India and Russia to deepest and darkest China to saying I don't think we've lost India and calling India a dead economy a month ago to saying India and the US have a special relationship and that there's nothing to worry about. What should one make of all the U-turns, the twists and turns in the ties between two countries that are comprehensive strategic partners? What would happen to the 25% plus additional 25% tariffs or sanctions imposed for buying Russian oil? And will there actually be a trade deal as both India and the US predict in a couple of months? What should one make of Howard Lutnick, US Commerce Secretary, just 24 hours earlier? He was saying India will say sorry within a month or two and have a trade deal on Trump's terms. With all these U-turns, how reliable is the US as a comprehensive strategic partner? Joining me on this India First special broadcast is Ambassador Venu Rajamoni, former career diplomat, ambassador to the Netherlands and author, Professor Brahma Chilani, professor, strategic thinker, author and commentator. Abhijit Iyer Mitra is a senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. Jayant Krishna was part of the Prime Minister's Skill India mission and senior fellow at the CSIS. And Peter Cardello, chief economist, Spartan Capital Securities, joins us from the United States of America. Ambassador Rajamoni, what explains, in your view, the change in Trump's tone and tenor from calling India a dead economy to saying we have a special relationship and that there's nothing to worry about?
Rob, I think this is so typical of President Trump. We have been watching this ever since he assumed office. He likes to wheel and deal. He likes to maneuver. He likes to say things, change it the next day, keep everyone guessing, surprise everyone. So I think he has just taken a different tack. He has realized that he has gone a little too far, perhaps, in the aggression against India. And now it is time to put a pause to that, or to put on the reverse gear a bit. So I don't think we can jump to conclusions based on one statement. We'll have to wait and watch what the next steps are on the part of the US. But on India's part, the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister have given a very measured and a positive response, indicating that if the US is willing to play ball, we are game. I think we have to see what next steps the US takes. What I think is important about President Trump's statement is the fact that he says US-India relations are special. While he's unhappy with what the Indian government is doing right now, or Prime Minister Modi is doing right now, Prime Minister Modi remains a friend, but India-US relations are very special. I think that is good for India. We have always argued that India-US have a very special relationship. And the reason we have not responded to all US provocations is because we are conscious of that relationship, of how important it is, not just for the two countries, but for the world.
Oh, absolutely. Professor Chilani, but how would this square with Howard Lutnick just yesterday saying Canada had an elbow up bravado and that fizzled out, and India too will realize you cannot fight and take on the biggest market in the world, and within a month or two, India will be at the White House to say sorry and have a deal on Trump's terms or words to that effect?
Make no mistake, what the Trump administration is doing is mounting pressure on New Delhi to accept a trade deal largely on Washington's terms. This is the end objective of the Trump administration. And when Trump blows hot one day and blows cold the other day, this is part and parcel of his strategy. These U-turns that we perceive as U-turns are actually very much the hallmark of his political strategy. For example, by saying that India has been lost to deepest, darkest China, he signaled strength to his base at home. And when the next day he says the US and India share a special bond, he ensures that the relationship with the key partner is not ruptured. So he does both. The important thing we need to note, while we are focusing now whether there's a thaw in the US-India relationship, there was no permanent rupture, so thaw is actually not the right word. But what he is clearly doing, he's trying to twist India's arm. And his Commerce Secretary's remarks clearly indicate that the trade deal he is seeking, Trump is seeking, is not just about trade. It's about other issues
Yes.
like foreign policy, about strategic issues. That's the reason why the Commerce Secretary said that India should leave the BRICS.
Yes.
They are trying to circumscribe India's strategic autonomy. And there is no way any government, not just the Modi government, any government in New Delhi is going to accept, is not going to accept
Oh, absolutely.
this kind of diktat.
And
And I think
by all accounts, so far, and I want you to stay with me because I want to get a quick word in before we open this up for a wider discussion. Professor Chilani, you're absolutely right. He had a long laundry list: leave BRICS, leave buying oil from Russia, and I'll just come to all those aspects. But Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Trump shared pictures of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Chinese President Xi Jinping, and the Russian President Vladimir Putin at Tianjin, saying the US had lost India and Russia to deepest and darkest China. Now, is there a realization that he and the MAGA ecosystem went a bit too far and that they were losing India? Or, this is just that part of his blow hot, blow cold tactics. He's still negotiating hard, trying to get India back into that conversation, and bang, that H-1B visa or something else, the sting would be in the tail.
Look, he said very early on in his presidency when that whack job Laura Loomer raised the H-1B visas that they were crucial to the American economy. He's not going to act on it. It really shows you more about how he uses the MAGA ecosystem. There've been these big MAGA influencers like Jack Posobiec and Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, especially, who was used to, vet the ideological loyalty of people joining the administration, who have now been caught flat footed, advancing a narrative which Trump is now trying to backtrack on. There's a reason, that taco term was applied to him. Now, you can call it taco, which is kind of derogatory, or you can say, like Professor Chelani did, that this is a negotiating tactic. He tries getting as much as he can. When he realizes he's gone a bit too far, he's going to withdraw. You remember what happened to, excuse me, Zelensky at the White House in February.
Yes.
And, 2 months later, everything's hunky and dory between Zelensky and him again. This seems more like a tactic. We need to, ignore MAGA trash talking because they're kind of disposable commodities. They're used and dumped as and when it suits Trump's strategy, whatever that strategy may be. And most importantly, it's very important to remember when he put out that tweet, you said, lost to deep, dark China. It could have gone either way. He could have either cut ties with India and escalated things, but it turned out that it was a backtracking. With the benefit of hindsight, we realize his appointment of Sergio Gore as the ambassador to India was the beginning of the backtracking because Sergio Gore is literally one call away from Trump. He can literally call Trump on his private phone and talk to him.
I'll
That is
come to Sergio Gore in just a moment because not many in India are very happy considering he's also, he'll have dual responsibilities, South Central Asia and ambassador to India. So is that actually in India's favor or not is a debate where the jury is still out. But stay with me, sir. Jayant Krishna, to be the third largest economy, India needs a trade deal, whether it's with the US or the European Union, better access to Chinese markets, best way to rise as rapidly as we can. But in your appreciation, are things returning on an even keel on the trade front, or it's not done till it's done when it comes to Donald Trump?
See, Gaurav, I feel, I would refrain from making any premature celebration just based on one positive statement which has come out from Trump. I think it's a part of his strategy to blow hot, blow cold. When the ties touch their lowest, he says something where we start celebrating. I would like to see this change of stance about India, for India, on a sustained basis, on a longer period of time before I make any judgment. I think one thing is very clear, so this, if it is a thaw which will last, it's anybody's guess. So I think I basically feel that yes, you're right. If India has to become the third largest economy, if India has to become a developed nation by the year 2047 or earlier, I think we need all. We can't lay all eggs in one basket. We need US, we need China, we need European Union, we need everything. And that's the reason
Okay.
India is, has signed FTAs or near equivalent FTAs with Australia, with UAE, with the UK, and talks are at a very advanced stage with the European Union also. I think we have to do everything. I mean, if our economy has to grow
Oh,
at eight
absolutely.
and a half to
Peter
9%,
Cardillo, Peter Cardillo, what explains this change? Is this a change in tone and tenor from the White House? Is the relationship returning on an even keel, or is this just part of the blow hot, blow cold tactics? He's just trying to get the best deal for the US.
Yeah, well, let me first start off by saying that this turn from the White House and from Trump in particular didn't surprise me. I knew this was likely to happen. Look, as many of your guests said before, we need to trade with India. We need to trade with other countries. No country is an island, and you can't have total isolation. If you do, your economy will fail. And so Trump's agenda is basically based on lowering the trade deficit and giving hefty tax cuts to everyone, which is a good thing, but it really doesn't necessarily accelerate economic activity to the point if you don't have a trade reduction. And the only way you can do that is by having tariffs. And as you may know, the trade deficit has come down substantially since President Trump took office, and that's due to the tariffs. So if that's to continue, and if he wants to avoid a recession here in the States, he needs to get trade agreements, not only with India, but with other countries as well.
But
And
instead of
that's
trade
his,
agreements, what we see are additional tariffs, and the state of the economy. The American media is talking about headwinds that the American economy is facing. And I'm coming to the aspect of trade and economy in just a moment, and job losses in the United States. But staying on the India-U.S. trade deal, Ambassador Rajamani, after 5 rounds of talks, we were told that the files after intense negotiations were on Trump's table, and suddenly we saw the imposition of 25% tariffs and then an additional 25% tariffs to punish India for what many have described, even in the US, as American failure. Many a slip between the cup and the lip. Even now, both sides are talking about a trade deal in a month or two. Or is this just posturing from both sides?
Well, Gaurav, the honest answer is we don't know. And more important is the fact that President Trump, as per the reports, was the crucial person who refused to go ahead with the deal and instead said, let's go with 50% tariffs, if that is correct. Has he really changed his mind? We do not know. Now,
Okay.
there has also been a lot of speculation on what would have caused his upset with India. But whatever be the reason, we are not sure whether he has changed.
Sir, give me a moment as we
this-
try to improve our audio link with you. We seem to be losing it for some reason. But Professor Chilani, India has stood firm on our red lines, not opening up agriculture, dairy and fisheries sectors. And Howard Lutnick seemed to indicate that we have to open up our sectors. We continue to insist that we have to have freedom to decide where we secure our energy needs from. Howard Lutnick says India will not only have to open up our markets, but will have to choose sides. The point that you were raising, say no to BRICS, no to oil from Russia, protect US interests. This divide appears to be too wide to bridge.
Gaurav, it's important to remember one important thing about Indian economy. It's not an export-oriented economy. Rather, it's a domestically oriented economy, an economy that relies on domestic consumption for its growth. So trade is important. A trade deal is important with the US. It's important only because the US-India relationship is critical for India, for technology and for its military security. It's in that larger context, a trade deal is important. Eventually, a trade deal will be signed, but not the one-sided trade deal that Trump wants. But the strains in the current US-India relationship have already proved to be one factor leading to Modi's cancellation of his visit to the UN General Assembly later this month. He normally, when he goes to New York for the UN General Assembly session, he meets with U.S. corporate leaders. He meets with Indian diaspora. Today, the environment is not conducive for his visit. So, even though the latest statements from Trump and Modi seem to indicate softening of the strains, we should not forget that at the same time, Modi's cancellation of his visit to the UN General Assembly indicates that the chill, in the U.S.-India relationship, the chill that Trump has caused, that remains an important issue. And I think it's important for us to recognize that while India has offered some concessions in the agricultural and dairy sectors, the Americans are actually demanding much more, not just in agriculture and dairy sectors. They're demanding a deal. Let's look at the trade aspects of it. They want a trade deal under which India will open up its entire market and accept American imports at zero tariffs, while they will still retain, the Americans will still retain. And in the last negotiations, they were still saying that they will retain 20% tariffs on Indian exports to the U.S. So this kind of lopsided trade deal that they want, forgetting about the foreign policy and strategic issues that they're also trying to incorporate into the trade deal, there is no way the Modi government can save face at home by accepting such a trade deal. So there's no way such a trade deal can be signed. If they want a trade deal, it'll have to be a balanced trade deal. India is not the EU, India is not Japan, and India certainly is not South Korea. They cannot impose a one-sided trade deal on India. And as we have seen from Mexico, once you give in to one demand of Trump, he comes back with another demand. You accept the second demand, he comes up with multiple more demands. This is what Mexico is discovering, that if you accept one demand, you open the door to unending demands from Trump.
Yes. And that's exactly why never given to a bully in the first place. And Abhijit Iyer Mitra, India appears to have stood firm. Those pictures from Tianjin, they were the most talked about pictures, not just in China, but across the world. Not just India, China, Russia together, but Prime Minister Narendra Modi walking hand in hand with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. But will the MAGA ecosystem, that surround sound, will that die down with a strategic direction from Trump? The fact that Prime Minister Narendra Modi responded saying that he reciprocated Trump's sentiments. I mean, those are not India's sentiments on our own. We've only reciprocated. Clear indication that an initiative came from Trump's side. India responded positively. There's no way that the MAGA ecosystem can try and spin this as India came seeking dialogue, India came and agreed to a deal on Trump's terms, or words to that effect that Lutnick seemed to indicate.
Absolutely. Look, we learnt our lesson from Operation Sindoor. What happened out there? Rubio and Vance made the calls. Trump never made a call. And he then said, oh, I brokered peace. And remember, our position was the same as it was on day one when Jaishankar called his counterpart in Pakistan and said, look, we're only targeting your military terrorist targets. We're keeping you out of it. If you stop, we'll stop. It was the same thing. Then the Americans told the Pakistanis to call. They called us. We did it. But Trump took all the credit, said, you know, we had called and we were desperate to get out of the situation and things like that. We learnt our lesson from there. We've played the game perfectly. He postures, we posture. Now, you know, MAGA tends to do a bit of low-level posturing. We didn't do that. There was none of that trash talking on the side that happened. The whole point of SCO, as I understand it, Prime Minister Modi did not want to go to the SCO, especially because it was in Tianjin, but in China, sorry. But he went. It had the intended effect. Right now, if you're looking at this, all you're seeing is Trump got scared of those photos of Putin, Xi, and Modi walking together. They have executed the reversal in course.
Okay.
I don't think it's all smooth sailing, by the way.
Yes.
It there is probably going to be another 2, 3 little scares in between before it comes back to normal in about a month or 2 months or so.
Okay.
But there's no way the MAGA ecosystem can spin it at any rate.
Okay, Ambassador Rajamani, do you also see this as Tianjin impact indications? And I'll just read out some of the quotes in a moment that came from the United States of America, that it's Donald Trump's biggest strategic mistake pushing India closer to China and Russia instead of doing just the opposite that all US administrations have done in the past 27, 28 years.
Well, I think anyone who is sensible in the US or in President Trump's circle would advise him or would tell him that what he did was wrong. And to push India away makes no sense whatsoever. To say that it is the Tianjin effect might be a little bit of an exaggeration. Of course, President Trump, once again, we do not know what all goes through his mind. He saw the pictures, he reacted to it. It may have had some impact, but in the long run, what is important to us as India is that we keep India-US relations on a steady course. The US is important to India, and India is equally important to the US. So as President Trump himself meant, sometimes these small things happen. We should not get overexcited about it, but at the same time, we should stay very firm in upholding our own national interests. I agree with Brahma when he said that this is a strategy to get India to agree to a deal on their terms. That is what India should not do. India should stay firm when it comes to what is important for us, and the US will have to come around, and we should just wait till the US comes around. And
Strategic patience.
we have other options.
So far, all indications are that India is standing firm. But Jayant Krishna, I want to quote to you some of these US media reports, including some of these journalists and networks that are considered close to President Trump. They're reporting that in the past 12 hours, and I'm just reading you reports from the past 12 hours, US job growth in August, that's slowed down, and that's signaling a deterioration in their labor market. Reports seem to indicate a 13,000 job loss, a drop in employment across sectors, including manufacturing and finance. Are some waking up to the fact that Trump's tariffs are causing adverse repercussions or tremors within the United States of America?
Yeah, Gaurav, I think so. The way mindlessly he has driven the tariff agenda, I think, one thing is very, very clear in the short run as well as in the long run, it'll do no good to the US at all. In fact, some effect of it is already visible in the US, where the kind of manufacturing going up he talked about, it has not happened except some announcements from the likes of Apple that yes, they will invest $600 billion in the US, right? So I think in today's day and age, let's compare China and India, right? Why is it that Trump hates China more than he hates India? That's the truth, right? I mean, he has scores to settle with China. But why, if there is only 30% tariff he has been able to levy on China and 50% on India, is because of the economic indispensability of China, right? China over the last few decades has strengthened itself so much, especially in manufacturing, that President Trump knows that, through India, through 50% tariff on India, President Trump is sending a signal to China that, look here, we can go as bad as 50%, if not more, right? Because China has become so economically indispensable that if US increases the tariff on Chinese imports beyond this percentage, it will hurt American economy also.
It already is when they held back rare earth material. But Peter Cardillo, I want to quote a report saying the US has added just 598,000 jobs so far in 2025. And this report then goes on to say that outside of 2020, when the pandemic hit, that's the fewest for the first 8 months since 2009, when the economy was barely recovering from that financial crisis. So, in your view, will the US see the adverse impact and do a mid-course correction? Or will the MAGA ecosystem actually now increase the rhetoric on that H-1B visa to specifically target India for a trade deal?
Yeah, well, with with the labor market basically crawling down to a halt, that's bad news for the American economy, and that could mean that if the tariff situation doesn't come to some sort of conclusion, not only with India but with other nations in a very short period of time, it could mean that the economy could be headed for a recession. And so that's one more incentive for the White House and for Mr. Trump to make deals. And I kind of think that that's what's going to happen. In terms of India, I have no doubt that the 50% tariffs that were placed on oil and the 25, 35% other tariffs will be eliminated and will be brought down to levels that both the United States and India can live with.
Okay, Professor Chelani, Nicholas Burns, former US ambassador to China and an international affairs expert, he warned that President Trump's misguided tariffs, as he put it, have weakened US alliances, whether with Japan or with South Korea or with India, and a major miscalculation on the part of the White House. He says America needs the help of these countries to counter the China, Russia, North Korea axis on display in Beijing. Now, do you see Donald Trump waking up to smell the coffee?
The reason why he has reacted the way he reacted by saying that India and Russia are lost to deepest, darkest China is because the American media across the political spectrum, including Fox News, but especially the newspapers like New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, were highlighting on the front pages how Trump has pushed India to mend ties with China. And the powerful imagery from Tianjin of Putin, Xi Jinping, and Modi clasping hands in a show of unity clearly underlined that Trump's approach toward India was backfiring. So he clearly is in a defensive mode. He's in defensive mode also for the reason that his pressure tactics on India aren't working. India is not wilting under Trump's pressure. Ironically, we should not forget one thing. In Modi's second term, that is when Trump was in his first term, and Trump stripped India of its GSP trade status and slapped tariffs on Indian aluminum and steel exports, the Modi government then retaliated by imposing counter tariffs on select US products. You don't need leverage of China. China has a near global monopoly on rare earths, for example.
Yes.
Any nation has some counter leverage. And India employed counter leverage in Modi's second term when Trump imposed these actions. And lo and behold, the Indian actions led US exporters in the US to lobby in Washington for an agreement, for a deal, so that the Indian counter tariffs can be removed. Now, this time, the Modi government has done nothing.
Yes.
It has just engaged in rhetoric, strong rhetoric, but beyond that, why don't we use our limited leverage to send a message to Washington that we're not going to take it lying down? So it appears to me, and I've seen that across governments now, successive governments, the longer they stay in office, the more risk averse they become, unfortunately.
Okay, Ambassador Rajamani, is that also your appreciation? Should we use the leverage or wait for an appropriate time to do so, or see whether without using that leverage, do things come back on an even keel?
I think this is the time for strategic patience, and that is what the government is exercising right now. The statement by President Trump marks a small shift in the reverse gear. Let us wait and watch. So if you want to take aggressive actions in response, there's plenty of time for that. But for the time being, we can wait and watch. We can see if the US changes its tack, and if it is possible to have a trade deal which is on equal terms, which meets the requirements of both countries, which is equitable. And at the same time, we must also keep in mind that the tariffs because of purchase of Russian oil is directly linked to what happens between Russia and Ukraine. And
Yes.
the US has been playing a major role there in trying to bring the countries together and the war to an end. So we need to wait and watch what happens there. If there is a ceasefire, if there is a pause in the fighting there, automatically the need for sanctions against Russia would go away, and along with that, the tariffs.
Okay, so Peter Cardillo, should that happen, should there be peace between Russia and Ukraine, those additional 25% tariffs go down. India, anyway, from what sources tell, India today was pitching for a tariff much lower than 20%, let alone 25%. But in a way, there are the people in India who say, why should we be punished for Donald Trump's failure to get a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine? And should Donald Trump also tell that MAGA ecosystem, whether it's Peter Navarro or Howard Lutnick, who called it either Modi's war or said that India would come to the talks table in a month or two to say sorry, to not use these kinds of words because they adversely impact the relationship?
Well, I think when it's all said and done, you're probably going to have a maximum tariff of about 15%. The harsh talk that comes out of Peter Navarro and Lutek, they're just playing the same game that Mr. Trump is playing. And so I wouldn't put too much into that. The best judge of all of this are the markets. And the markets have not been really afraid, nor have they acted negatively to the statements that's been coming out of the White House, in particular Navarro, Lustek, and President Trump himself. So I think the market is convinced of that, like I am convinced of it. So it's just a matter of time. I think at the end we're looking at 15% maximum tariffs on India and most likely other countries as well. If you look at what happened with Japan, President Trump finalized the trade deal just the other day, and it was 15%.
Yes, but look at the kind of words they've used, that Japan will invest $500 billion and President Trump will decide where those $500 billion will be invested. And India cannot make either these promises, Abhijit Iyer Mitra, of investing billions of dollars in the United States of America, nor let Donald Trump decide where any investment in the US, should it happen, how will that be spent. But President Trump, Abhijit, has had no success on the Ukraine front. And Ashley Tellis cautioned White House, saying, stop singling out India as the author of the complications for Trump's peace initiative in Ukraine. There are many who bear the responsibility for making Trump's life difficult with respect to Ukraine's peace initiative. Stop singling India out as if that's the only author for his misfortunes.
Yeah, let me just respond to that by saying this, is that these big promises that come for investments, not only from nations, but also from corporate America, most of them don't come to fruition.
Yes.
So I wouldn't put too much into that.
Fair enough. Abhijit?
Look, this is one of those classic cases where he tries. All right, he tries. When he fails, he has to beat a retreat. And look, to be fair to him, he's had some success. You had to have the Secretary General of NATO, the former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, call him daddy and massage his ego and things like that. He managed to force the Europeans to up their defense spending. Now, what it results in, Europe has very significantly deindustrialized, so we don't even know the costs of reindustrialization in order to, realize their defense spending. Ultimately, what Trump is doing is he's distorting the US market and he's imposing higher costs on American citizens. Remember, all these tariffs are not borne by the producer, they are borne by the American consumer. And differential tariffs lead to a great distortion of the US market, which leads to lots of, down the supply chain costing. So the inflation can actually multiply rather than just add up to the sum total of those tariffs. Best of luck to him. In this particular case, we stood strong. We didn't trash talk. I think it's very important in such cases, and I agree with Rajamani sir, that strategic restraint is very important. The last thing we need to do is become like Krishna Menon going and hurling abuse at America for everything under the sun
Yes.
and respond to everything. Or give those pointlessly gratuitous statements that Indira Gandhi or Rajiv Gandhi or Nehru used to do.
Okay.
Unnecessary. We've achieved our goals. That's all we required.
Okay, but is the trust lost, Professor Brahmachalani, before I, bring in Ambassador Rajamani, has that trust been lost? Because, Professor Chilani, a relationship requires predictability. And with the US now, we don't know what Trump will say on Monday, what he may say on Tuesday, and what will the situation be on the weekend.
You're absolutely right, Gaurav. It takes long efforts to build mutual trust. It took 25 years to build some degree of mutual trust between the US and India. Now that trust has been corroded to a significant extent, and rebuilding it will take time. But in a way, it's good for India because Trump has opened India's eyes. He has opened India's eyes to the risks of too much dependency on Washington. Just the way during Operation Sindoor, he opened India's eyes to relying too much on the US for military hardware, for defense cooperation. So these developments, in a way, are good for India because we tend in India to get carried away. Realistically, we should have known all these facts.
Yes.
Yet we are a sentimental lot. We get carried away very easily, and we believe in things like peace and restraint. For example, the counter tariffs that Modi imposed in his second term against the U.S. on select American exports to India eventually led to a trade deal on the eve of the 2023 G20 summit in New Delhi. Without the Indian counter tariffs, there would have been no deal.
Okay.
The trade deal resulted from the Indian counter tariffs. The American exporters were lobbying Washington to get these Indian counter tariffs removed. So ultimately,
And I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. Peace only comes through strength. And India, in Op Sindoor, we were able to display our strength, our military and strategic strength. But Ambassador Rajamani, the point that Professor Brahmachalani raised, when it comes to defense hardware, we are still looking at buying fighter jet engines, a deal worth $1 billion for our the GE404 engines, and then GE414 engines. How reliable a defense partner would the United States be?
I think that is an uncertainty we will have to live with for as long as we procure systems from the US, and the US indeed has very advanced systems. So the best solution is to make in India, but make in India is going to take a long time, and it's going to be a difficult process without instant results. So already we have diversified our basket considerably so that we are not dependent on any one country. We cannot completely eliminate some dependence on the US, but as the history of India-US relations has taught us, we must be prepared for setbacks. President to president, policies change, the views of administration change, uncertainties come into our relationship. So we must create institutional linkages which can overcome such bumps when they happen. I hope this is also one small instance such as that.
Okay, just some headwinds that this relationship is facing. But last 30 seconds that I have on this part of the show, Jayan Krishna, the focus must remain, one, on upskilling, and two, Atmanirbharta, and especially when it comes to defense and high-end technology.
Oh, absolutely. I think the way I see whatever US has done to India, or for that matter to the rest of the world, I think it's a never before opportunity for India to reform big time. Right? We have started with GST reforms. I think you are right. We have to take up skilling Indians, very very seriously. If India has to reap a rich demographic dividend, the time is now, because this so-called demographic dividend is not an endless window of opportunity for India. Right? In about 2 to 3 decades time, Indian population would start the negative growth would start in the population. Already the growth rate has slowed down, right? So I think we have to. I mean, one reason why post COVID, when a lot of countries were looking at India as a worthwhile destination to have their supply manufacturing supply chains ending at, we did not get those kind of investments. One reason was that, we didn't have adequate skills, especially when it came to Industry 4.0 technologies. I think we as a country, we have to re-energize the Skill India mission. We
Okay.
have to ensure that on all these technologies which matter in manufacturing today, we take it up on a war footing. I think
Yes.
that's very, very important, Gaurav.
Okay, so far things appear to be returning on an even keel, but will it remain so? Or with Donald Trump, until it's done, the deal is still not done, and we'll be tracking that story very closely. To all my guests, many thanks for joining me.